Welcome, folks. This is Bob from BBD with geopolitical views and news. I had finished yesterday showing how the relationship between Washington and Beijing was developing. This is very critical because a lot of chatter either in Washington or in Delhi is about Washington is the liberal guys, the anti-nuclear guys are trying to again portray New Delhi in a bad light, a base trying to hold our feet to the fire about democracy, about Katsa and S-400. Similarly, the same kind of chatter is developing in New Delhi about Washington and how it can't be trusted and so forth, and how will maybe there will be some kind of a detonate between Washington and Beijing and stuff like that. However, let's put that to rest for the time being. You first have Tesla cars banned by Chinese military. So here, now technology that's coming up from that region is gonna hit a wall in China. Whether it's Tesla, so the next big thing for Tesla has to be India. Musk might as well get used to it. Here again, Washington-China talks kick off on a testy tone. Diplomats of the two nations publicly criticize each other over human right abuse. And based on what I'm hearing from CNN, this is the first time ever. It's never happened so publicly in front of the media that the both of them have gone at each other, boom, 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 like boom, boom, Mancini, right? Another way to put it, bitter duels at first Washington-China meeting under Biden regime. Then you have this gunpowder and drama. Look at what they put it as. Explosive starts his foreign policy report, right? But what's happening when you juxtapose this in India, right? You have Modi and Austin discuss Indo-Pacific defense ties. It says Austin flew into India on the final leg of a three-nation tour that has already taken him to Japan and North Korea and is the first senior leader for the new Washington and Biden administration to make an in-person visit to the country. Okay, now here, if you look at what the foreign policy press is saying, right, it's basically calling this that while the meetings with Korea, South Korea, and in Japan were 2+2, so they had a much higher value, but this is kind of downgraded because the other two left for Alaska to meet with China, while the defense secretary Austin came on his own to India and whatever. But that's not the truth, because what you're hearing here is completely different. He says, though Katsa is going to be an issue, but hey, that's life, right? To strengthen Indo-Pacific ties, by the defense secretary in the Biden administration calls on the PM. India to seek Washington's waiver for S-400 system. This is going to be testing for both these countries, right? One thing is for sure, I personally think India doesn't need the S-400. It's just it may have been a good system, but and it's been projected through disinformation from both ends. Just remember about this S-400, right? I am told from people in the woodwork that actually India had requested the THAAD, but for some reason at that time Washington declined, and India got upset and went with the S-400. Ever since then, this chatter has developed in India that S-400 is a far more comprehensive system than THAAD, and the THAAD has failed. But of late, if you also remember, if you've been reading the press, the S-400's trial runs also in Turkey failed. So hey, which is the better one? Who knows? But right now, for geostrategic reasons, in my opinion, one should junk the S-400 and try and play and with the sensitivities of Washington, because after all, they are going to be supplying us with the entire high technology bandwagon of equipment to take on China, and Russia is just not going to do it, right? So what do we have? A message to Washington, and that is, as Prime Minister Modi tweeted after meeting Austin, the bilateral partnership is a force for good. But he says, if the United States sanctions India under Katsa, it will set the relationship back. It certainly will, right? I think this relationship is bigger than that, but coercive diplomacy between two in a partnership is not something easy to swallow, especially in this particular political environment, even in India, where the opposition is going to be gunning for any slip up by this particular government, right? So what do we have here? What the other thing is, this is PM US Defense Secretary stress strategic partnership and Indo-Pacific stability. What do we say here? Secretary Austin commended India's leadership role in the Indo-Pacific and growing engagement with like-minded partners across the region to promote shared goals. The two sides reaffirmed their commitment to promote a free and open regional order. Both sides exchanged perspective on shared challenges confronting the region and committed to further strengthening their broad-ranging and robust defense cooperation, it said. Soon after he reached New Delhi, Austin in a Twitter post said, "Thrilled to be here in India. The breadth of the cooperation between our two nations reflects the significance of our major defense partnership as we work together to address the most pressing challenges facing the Indo-Pacific region." Right? Now here let me just say, we have to compartmentalize this relationship. We got to have defense which has to be stonewalled against all the other issues, whether it's these democratic issues, whether it is trade issues, because this is one relationship that is critical for both. Not only for both, it's critical for this region. And hey, at the end of the day, we do have some kind of democracy. I agree, it needs to be upgraded, and changed, and actually stop the backslide. But at this point of time, this is the relation that is critical, and both these countries need to work really, really hard to protect. He says, like he rightly says, PM emphasis defense ties in talks with Austin. Then we have this, the centrality of defense in India-US ties. That's the key part. He says, there are great alliances and great partnerships. Every American principal in the present day understands that India will never be an ally of the US. That's true. For the US Department of Defense, India offers stability or at least a degree of balance in a region beset by Chinese bellicosity, whether on land, on the commons, or in cyberspace and the internet. China's one-sided, forceful and obstruction imperatives are clear today. As far as bilateral defense ties are concerned, situationally, India and Washington, in the administration Washington, could not be in a better position. Okay, it says in sum, these agreements, as the three agreements are signed, are potentially transformative if and when they are fully implemented. In many ways, defense ties have saved the larger bilateral relationship from political lethargy, and negotiators dealing with matters of commerce and trade have been unwilling to reconcile differences. As that's what's happened, right? Experts argue that the over-securitization of the defense relationship presents an uneven organizing principle for a broad-ranging relationship. Trade data and Washington and Indian positions in multilateral fora, some suggest, ought to be considered alongside and parallel to strengthening defense ties. But that, he says, would be a mistake. Trying to balance the scales between dairy standards, carbon emissions, and the sale of unmanned aerial vehicles unnecessarily overcomplicates the tight negotiated defense relationship, right? Partnerships such as this, rather than treaty alliances, are designed to provide more room for maneuver. This is what great partnerships ought to account for, folks. More after the break. Welcome back, folks. What do we have here? The build-up to the visit by Secretary Austin went like this. Defense Secretary and Biden administration to visit India next week, meet Rajnath. But what was important to note here, PLA yet to withdraw from positions seized during Ladakh standoff. Top Admiral from Washington, right? And what do we have here? Deeper ties, Indo-Pacific on the agenda of Defense Secretary visit. The Defense Secretary in the Biden administration, okay? In Biden era first, Defense Secretary from his administration set to visit India this month. Indo-Pacific to be key focus area of talks. Okay. First high-level visit by Biden administration. Defense Secretary plans India trip. All this has happened, but this is building up, right? But very interesting. Like I read to you about Tesla being banned in China in defensive establishments. At the same time, a long time ago, this was Tamo's Tesla tweet electrifies industry. Later denies speculation about TAP. Now what? Hey, folks, one's getting banned. India's the next best opportunity. Tata, what are you waiting for? If not Tesla, go with Apple, because there's news that Apple's also looking for an assembly line manufacturer of vehicles, right? Now, what do we have here? Stand by India, Congressman to Biden administration. Then we have Washington seeks stronger India ties to counter China in this new document of theirs. It says President Joe Biden, in his maiden interim national security strategic guidance, has asserted that it will be the Washington that will set international, that will be Washington that sets international agenda, and not an assertive and authoritarian China, and called for strengthening partnerships with India. Besides ensuring supply chains for pharmaceuticals are not overtly reliant on overseas network prone to disruption. India is probably one of those ones that is not prone to disruption to some extent, that we are seeing even now with vaccines. So the Biden administration has in the guidance claimed that by restoring Washington's credibility and reasserting forward-looking global leadership, it will ensure that Washington is not a mere assertive and authoritarian China, sets the international agenda, working alongside countries like India to shape new norms and agreements globally and advance its interests and reflects its value. This is a great time for opportunity for India. As the world changes, alignments change, rules of the games change, India can actually be there when these rules are being formed and be there at the pinnacle. We've missed the bus ever since independence, folks. This is one time. We should not let our doubts about whether Washington will let us down, or can we trust Washington, which is the general take me off in India, when whenever you want to have an escape wall, oh, you can't trust Washington. That kind of bull needs to be put to rest. So what does Harsh Pant write, right? Which has been quite a change, because earlier he was saying that Washington's foreign policy was kind of all kind of gloop-de-gook and not defined. Now all of a sudden he says, hey, back. India and the world, says Harsh Pant. Indian elites still remain nervous when it comes to engaging with Washington. He says that the Biden administration, so early in its terms, decided to convene the meeting speaks volumes about the priorities of Washington, as well as the enduring relevance of the quadrilateral platform with all the intended implications. Okay. Then he says, and last month in a phone call between President Biden and Modi, the two leaders tried to set the bilateral policy agenda, wherein two issues emerged as the core of their engagement: climate change and a free and open Indian Pacific. And India under Modi is rapidly positioning itself to emerge as a serious stakeholder in climate change conversations, with India expected to go beyond its Paris Agreement targets. Of what an asset, folks. With just about a month of taking office, the Biden administration's outreach to India has been robust and substantive. And yet, there is a strange tendency, as like I was talking to you about, in sections of the Indian strategic establishment, to continue to doubt the strength of this relationship. What is even more troubling is that a partisan approach has begun to color Indian elites' assessment and analysis of their agreement. And I would put it beyond Russia and China that are providing the gist for this disinformation, but they seem to have infiltrated all folks, all our systems, right? Who says, and that when India was on the margins of global politics, today India is at the very core, with a strong government and an aspirational population. If India could stand up to the world in the 80s and 90s, when the nation was perhaps at its most vulnerable, there is no reason why today's India should worry about America's proclivities. If today India is ready to stand up to China and rebuff its bullying, it also has the self-confidence to ignore the ideological posturing emanating from Washington. India-Washington ties, New Delhi-Washington ties will continue to grow because of their fundamental strategic convergence, and Indian democracy will evolve at its own pace. The challenge for New Delhi is to configure the domestic consensus which will allow India to withstand such pulls and pressures. And more importantly, we need to ensure that we stay clear-headed, not get caught up with this bogey about trusting Washington, because that's just a bogey. We need to build on our defense relationship, protect it, and build further on what the Quad is offering us in pharma, in solar, in AI, in 5G, in technology. Jai Hind.